All right, what's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in. My name is Iyad Alhamid, and this is Trusted Tech Team. We're super excited for today's conversation. As you may all know, Microsoft Intune has become an indispensable tool for managing devices and applications in all kinds of organizations. And with its evolution, it's accumulated a lot of interesting features that many of you have reached out to us about. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We have our Microsoft experts, Afif Ahmed and Nicholas Wallace. They're going to be dropping in their amazing insights as always. So make sure to stay fully immersed in the conversation and definitely leave your questions in the Q&A section. We're going to be answering these, as many of them as time permits. So let's kick things off with some introductions. Nico, I'm going to pass it over to you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do here at Trusted Tech Team?
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. My name is Nico, or Nicholas Wallace. I'm a cloud architect here at Trusted Tech Team, and I do the pro services side for implementation and anything Microsoft 365. I also dabble a little bit in Azure, and yeah, that's about me. So I want to pass along to my coworker Afif, and he'll give introductions as well.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. My name is Afif Ahmad. I'm a lead cloud support engineer here at Trusted Tech Team. A little bit of my role and my responsibilities in my day-to-day is managing our wonderful cloud support team, managing all the help desk and support tickets that come from all of our clients, being an escalation point, assisting a lot of the pro services projects and functioning as an Intune subject matter expert here at TTT.
Thank you, guys. Now, before we move any further, I just want to remind everyone that we are going to be announcing the winner of our $500 Amazon e-gift card towards the end of the webinar, so stay tuned for that. Afif, I'll pass it back to you. Can you give us an overview of Intune?
Definitely, thank you. Yeah, when we're talking about Intune, the first thing that comes to mind is MDM. MDM, what is MDM? Mobile device management, right? And if we think about the mobile device management evolution and like the traditional methods of how devices used to be managed, I think the first thing that comes to mind to all IT professionals is Active Directory, right? Active Directory and GPOs. Well, that evolved and scenarios where employees in enterprise offices where we see cubicles being managed or computer labs or anything in that sense, it needed to be a little bit more efficient, right? GPOs weren't enough. We want to push out applications. And from that point, we started to see Microsoft evolving with SCCM. With SCCM, we got a lot better, but it was limited, right? It was an on-prem technology. But, as it started to evolve, that's where Intune came into play. Some MDM notable mentions you can think of are like Landesk, Ninja RMM, stuff like that. Or if you're talking about iOS and macOS, you're talking about Jamf or Ivanti or anything in that sense. And when it comes to Microsoft Intune, the first thing that comes to my mind is cloud computing. And when we think about cloud computing, I mean, it's nothing new. It's been trending. I see it all over the internet, especially on LinkedIn, following all these IT professionals. But what really accelerated this whole shift from like this modern workspace, I guess what you can call it, and that's what Microsoft seems to call it as well, is the cloud computing and the whole remote work aspect, right? I mean, I think that COVID really accelerated this where companies really want to see how their devices are being managed, right? And creating that level of efficiency where all the internal resources of a company still accessible at a remote level. And that's where Intune comes into play.
Perfect. Thank you, Afif. It's really fascinating to see how Intune has progressed. Can we delve a little bit deeper? Nico, what are some of Intune's most useful features for organizations?
Man, where do I start? So Intune, as an MDM, I think the shining star and what everyone here is trying to tune in for is how to set up Autopilot. I think Autopilot is the best feature within Intune that gives you the most ROI. So with Autopilot, we're able to pretty much white glove provision devices, zero touch deployment, save you a lot of money and cost on that back end where you don't have guys setting up laptops for hours upon hours anymore. They can focus on other things. It gives single leader IT teams to more flexibility to do other day-to-day tasks instead of just provisioning mass laptops. I think leveraging that and doing mass app deployment as well through Autopilot would also benefit a lot of IT teams as well. Doing mass configuration policies to devices and controlling them, how Afif was saying, through their former GPOs, managing compliance and data compliance and conditional access through compliance policies. We have a lot of integration with Defender in terms of managing AV, firewall settings, BitLocker encryption, lapse solution, just all these amazing features bundled into a very, streamlined licensing plan, right? And it's usually included in like the Microsoft E3 products, the business premiums, which a lot of businesses, small, medium-sized businesses, are leveraging day to day. And it's a very underutilized feature set that I see, small companies not using, which, would streamline them so effectively.
Thank you, Nico. That's definitely a big one. I know that Autopilot is, Afif, I know that Autopilot is one of the things that you enjoy talking about the most. Can you take us a little bit deeper on into how it works, and maybe shed some light on some of its lesser known features and some pitfalls that you can think of that everyone should know about?
Definitely, more than happy to. In fact, I'm going to share and give everybody a visual of a typical Autopilot deployment and how that process looks like for an end user. Give me one moment, please. So right here, I have one of our test devices here over at Trusted Tech Team, and it's pretty much going to go through a typical Autopilot enrollment for a device. So I'm going to go ahead and start. So typically, as we could see, we're presented with the login screen. And just as Nick was mentioning, I feel like a lot of these small to medium-sized businesses can really leverage a lot of these wonderful features, such as company branding, as we could see here, adding that company logo, having all these little side metadata where you can like put in like customization, just so you know that this device is associated with your organization. So it's going to go ahead and log in. It's going to recognize that it belongs to this tenant. So from here, it should capture all that user information, and it's going through a device setup. Through the device setup, we could see it's going through some steps: a device preparation, a device setup, and account setup. What typically goes on in a device preparation is it's joining, it's getting familiar. It knows that, hey, I'm associated to your organization. I'm going to go through what's called any kind of initial configuration. So initial configuration could really mean like getting these profiles and policies or any kind of initial association that you can make a priority with your Autopilot deployment. And what's really through the device setup, we could see it right here. It's going through security policies, certificates, network connections, applications. That pretty much we can customize and let it know what are the priority apps, what are the priority configuration policies do we want. And as we can see here in our virtual machine, device preparation is all good. We have a green check mark to reflect that. Device setup is good as well. And as soon as a user enters its credentials, it's doing the account setup. As you can see right here, it's getting familiar. It's getting all that user information, letting it know that, okay, so-and-so is logging in. There's additional apps that need to be installed, maybe some additional policies, certificates, etc. Wonderful. It goes ahead and completes itself, and we get introduced to the desktop. And these are the apps that we set as a priority for our test machine. As you can see, Zoom is popping up, Ring Central, Google Chrome. And now if you think about it as for your organization, you could set it up whatever apps that you want to have as a priority, right? Maybe it's Adobe Pro for all of you graphic designers out there, or QuickBooks for all of your accountants. So if you're starting to get that, you can see the bigger picture of how this Autopilot deployment can be very efficient for your environment. So right here, we're going through, as you can see, we got 7-zip in there. We got some web links. What's really cool about Intune is that it supports web links as well. We got some web links in there, getting familiar. We got Google Earth Pro, all of the Office 365 apps that are getting in there. You got YouTube.com. It already recognizes the user credentials via SSO policies that were configured through Intune as well. That's wonderful. And I believe another thing that we're going to show you real quick is OneDrive. So another thing that we configure, and very modernly, you would see this, where you can configure Intune policies, configuration profiles to capture user information so that process is seamless and automated for them. So you can have all your users kind of just sign in and have that seamless experience where it's all automated, and all their data and any kind of SharePoint sites they're associated with will populate as well. And some of the pitfalls what we see in app assignment, right? I mean, when it comes to all these larger apps like AutoCAD and all these engineering apps, I've noticed that there tends to be some downfall. However, it's just a game of patience. Nick and I can go on all day in regards to Intune and having patience, especially with application deployment, and especially when it comes to these larger apps. But there's no problem. I mean, it's doing its job. It's all working in the background. It's just a game of patience. To highlight some of the lesser known Autopilot features, I would say one of them would be app protection policies. And what app protection policies are is, for example, if I were to have a BYOD device and it's for all of my users in my organization to access sensitive information still from their mobile devices, I can't really manage their personal devices, right? However, I can manage their usability and functionality and how they use SharePoint, Outlook, stuff like that. And another thing is conditional access policies. I'll go in depth with that a little bit more on my next section, but another highlight that I want to mention is the support of iOS and macOS Apple devices. Yes, Intune does support iOS and macOS Apple devices, Android and Linux as well. So if you're an organization that's supporting all devices and you have iPhones as corporate devices that you give off to your employees, they're still manageable. You can still sync it in with Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager if you're using K-12 education, and Android as well. And then that would be the Google Play Store for business. So that's all supported within Intune, and you could sync up your volume purchasing program and all the apps and have a seamless app deployment as well. Now, when we're talking about deployment and app deployments, I think one of the biggest key features that get underlooked is dynamic device grouping and really understanding what the functionality of that is, right? If you're a large organization and you have, let's just say, 20 departments, right? HR, accountants, graphic designers, IT, et cetera, et cetera. It's really essential that you kind of like nitpick and really solidify the dynamic groupings within Azure and in Intune and make it both a cohesive system. Because the reason why is with that investment and that time getting into it, if I wanted to be a lot more granular with my deployment and be a little bit more aggressive, if I have that dynamic grouping infrastructure in place, it'll be a seamless experience. And another thing that I wanted to brush on and transition into is the security within Intune, right? So there's a lot of great security features that are embedded into it that belongs to the Microsoft ecosystem. And I'll start with Defender 365, right? With Defender 365 becoming a lot more trending and being an antivirus solution for a lot of enterprises and organizations, what it reflects on the Intune side is Defender for Endpoint, right? We're here on this webinar to discuss the management of your endpoint devices. So with Defender for Endpoint, you could support and have secure devices for those devices that we've mentioned: Mac OS, iOS, Android, your personal computers, et cetera, et cetera. And with Defender for Endpoint, we could set attack threat policies and do a little bit of DLP with Purview. And yeah, the functionalities are endless. And when it comes to device management, right? If I wanted to perform wipes or reset and lock devices, Intune is very UI friendly in that regards. And let me go ahead and share this screenshot with everybody, just so I can give everybody a visual of what I'm talking about so passionately here. Give me 1 second. So this is like a common UI experience within Intune. If I were to click a device, see, when it comes to like the IT management of things, this is the UI experience, right? We have functionalities where I could retire devices, meaning that I don't want them to belong to my organization anymore, and I plan to e-waste them or something in those regards. I could do a remote wipe, right? Okay, let's just say Betty is leaving the organization and I got to give this computer to Susan. If I could go ahead and wipe that, it'll be ready for Susan by, the next day or a couple hours, really. I have the function to delete a device, right? If let's just say the autopilot process is not working and there's some error codes that I'm seeing, if I don't want to deal with that or it's telling me to delete, this is where I perform that function. Remote lock, sync. Sync is probably one of the most common buttons you're going to be pressing, because if I'm setting up, creating new configuration policies or profiles or deploying apps, I got to make sure that the device has been syncing with Intune and communicating back and forth. I could see that I have reset passcode, restart, collect diagnostics, do a fresh start, an autopilot reset, meaning that, hey, it probably didn't successfully go through that autopilot process. I can let it go through again. And talking about the defender and security side of things, I have the ability right here within Intune, instead of going to the defender admin portal, do quick scans, full scans, updating the client that's installed in each device. I have the ability to rotate the local admin password, which a lot of you IT professionals would know it as LAPS, BitLocker key encryption rotation. So if you're implementing that level of security and encryption within your organization, this is where you would refer to. I have the ability to rename device, do a quick assist remote session, and so on and so forth. And that concludes the security portion of that.
Thank you so much, Afif. I see we have a ton of questions in the chat of cards of a lot of the configuration profiles and the different types of configuration methods and how to hybrid join and join the VPN and some of the other restrictions that we can do, security restrictions we can do. So we'll take time at the end of the webinar to address a lot of those questions, and we'll go one by one and try to answer as many as we can before our time runs out. But I wanted to kind of sidetrack to the next step of our webinar, which would be app deployment, right? So with app deployment, we can do Microsoft Store apps. We can launch apps available for certain users through company portal. We can do MSIs, EXEs, AppX, PKGs from iOS and Mac. So a lot of these apps we can package up, deploy with Intune, and then test and provision and get them as streamlined as possible so that we have a very subtle end user experience. So with EXEs, we would package them up into a particular file format for Intune, and we can determine the supersedence, the rules, the registry edits that are required for this app to install into the device. We can tell it that it can only install for if it sees another app. There's limitless opportunities here when it comes for app deployment. It's really, with app deployment, it's all like with imagination. We can PowerShell and script in certain fields and registry edits so that our app deploys correctly. It's very granular to the sense that we can determine every single step of the way and how an app installs to how it's launched. and then control which users get that, and then also deploy that in a self-service portal like company portal as well. And then the most frequent difficulties I see, like small business and owners and IT teams kind of facing when it comes to app deployment, is how do I get this really unique coded app, this custom app, deployed out to all my machines? And here at TTT, we leverage tools that allow us to package up some EXTs as MSIs, and we'll work with you and your team to make sure that app gets deployed flawlessly and seamlessly within your environment, and then to the specific users that you need them to that app to deploy to. So if it's only just power users, we can go ahead and do that. If it's all users and all devices, it's a core app, we can also scope that way. It really gives us the flexibility to manage every aspect of device app deployment, right down to the user level.
Sweet. Thank you, Nico. Let's start tackling some of these questions we're getting. I'm seeing one here. How would I block end users from copy and pasting company data from our managed environments and sending externally? Example, copying sensitive data from Outlook and sending to a Gmail account.
So that can also, we can, once the device is Intune joined and compliant, we can actually leverage like DLP conditional access to prevent any data loss, right? So we can deploy Defender for Endpoint, get all the get connected to that device, and then we can put strict rules in on our compliance side to prevent data from leaving the device. Say attaching a USB storage device, we can block that kind of media connections for people to exfilling data out. We can put DLP policies in place on your SharePoint OneDrive to prevent people from pulling, printing, or and we can encrypt certain files, say that if they're labeled certain ways. There's a lot of different ways we can tackle DLP and compliance, and it doesn't necessarily pertain to the Intune scope. It spans holistically to all of 365. And Intune would be one of the many different ways that we would secure our endpoint, so that when data gets leaked onto a device, we can control where that data goes and how it's shared.
Thank you, Nico. So another question we're getting in the chat: does Defender for Endpoint support EDR, XDR, or logging?
Windows Defender, Microsoft Defender, sorry, not Windows Defender, Microsoft Defender does have an XDR/MDR kind of solution. It's Defender for Endpoint. It is a more premium license. There are abilities where you can escalate your case or a threat, an incident that has happened in your environment to an investigative team with Microsoft, and that is readily available.
Right. And then your EDR within Defender for Endpoint are going to be known as your ATP, which is like Advanced Threat Protection Policies. So that's more of like your detection and response type of deal.
Thank you, guys. The next question we have here: does Intune allow for managing USB storage access or monitoring USB file transfers?
Yeah, we can actually lock down. Like external media being attached to the device, and prevent exfiltration of data from that device. So that would be within a configuration policy. We can definitely lock that down. We can also encrypt that drive through BitLocker. Though I wouldn't recommend it, because usually someone's attaching USB devices. It's their personal data.
Yeah, you're going to be forced to format, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, no one wants to do that. Now the next one we have here is about Wi-Fi networks. So in public Wi-Fi networks, how does the user-driven method work? In order to join the on-premises domain environment, how do they connect to the VPN?
That would all be configured via a configuration profile. But when it comes to a hybrid environment, this is something that Nick and I actually done previously for a client of ours. we would have to make sure that all that information gets into your Intune environment, right? Making sure that we have the right OUs synced, making sure that the Intune connector is installed on the DC or the server where Active Directory or SCCM is hosted. From that ability, you already have that kind of like that networking communication set. So depends on how complex your network is, but if you're on-prem or off-prem and all those parameters are set, the autopilot process and the drop shipping and the pre-provisioning or white glove, whatever you want to call it in that sense, should be able to be a successful deployment.
Thank you, Afif. The next one should be pretty simple. What are the minimum requirements for using Intune?
Well, it's most it's very not crazy requirement. It's, I believe, Windows 10 and 11. I believe the latest version would be 1703, I believe, or 1709 is
1709, yeah,
is the most minimum, is the minimum required like feature update that you'll have to be on to leverage Intune in your Windows environment.
Yes, and for more details, let me post actually the link here for the system requirements that you can get from Microsoft. Should be in the chat. All right, let's get the next one. When devices are assigned, how does the device naming convention work?
Oh, so when devices, so we're talking about name schema, that's actually done through Autopilot. With Autopilot, when we white glove and provision a device, we actually can fundamentally control how we name the devices. Usually how devices are named in a classical infrastructure is we would put a prefix in front of them and an asset tag. We can do an asset tag, or we can use a reg edit to do naming, serial number. I like to go with a serial number, and that's from the Autopilot side. I know also with what Afif is showing here, we can change at will the device name and who the device is assigned to. So gone are the days of asset tagging devices and having these big Excel spreadsheets and putting what user is using it. So it's all controllable from this screen, and then also from your Autopilot configuration or your deployment profile.
Sweet. Okay. The next one we have is, I've been using Ninja RMM for several years, which works well but not great. Could Intune be a true replacement and also allow me to remotely manage machines?
So when we talk about Intune, we talk of it as an MDM in the sense that we like to, what I believe it does lack in a sense is ad hoc capability. So being able to run a PowerShell at will, run a remote session, or a seamless remote unattended access session at will to truly manage your devices ad hoc. I feel Intune can lack in that portion, but once we pair it with a remote management tool like Ninja One, it becomes a truly flushed out solution where you have Intune, you front load Intune with a lot of your standard processes, you develop out your onboarding processes, your offboarding processes, and then for your true end user support, you would leverage something like Screen Connect or Ninja One to do that ad hoc end user support. You know, the users can't find their printer, or you need to run an immediate PowerShell script. It's not saying we can't run these things from Intune, but they're less, they're not ad hoc, they're more scheduled. We can schedule these to run across our entire organization. So when we look at Intune, we're looking at an organizational front instead of a per user support, which is what your more traditional RMMs can do.
Right, and to piggyback off what Nick said, yeah, it's definitely essential that you do kind of in the meanwhile still pair an RMM, AnyConnect, Ninja, etc. Intune does, however, have that remote assistance ability. It's still a product that I think that still needs a little bit work. Now, would I strongly recommend it? You know, I think it's still there. as far as the RMM aspect of it, but hopefully down the line we see better results.
Thanks, guys. So the next question we have is actually about licensing. What Microsoft 365 license is required, E3, E5, or is this an add-on?
Intune is both in Microsoft E3s, Microsoft E5s. It's a 100% include there. There are a la carte add-ons for Intune Plan 1 and Intune Plan 2 that you can tag on to your existing 365 licensing, and it's also included in Microsoft Business Premium. So those are the licensing SKUs that kind of bundle Intune into it, and then it also can be a la carte as well.
Thank you. Quick reminder for everybody, please drop in your questions in the Q&A section. It's going to make it a lot easier for us to find them as opposed to the chat. But we are seeing some more questions coming in. Can you set a policy to update the local admin password automatically? For instance, change the admin password every 60 days.
That's a fun one. That's actually a super new and useful tool that we've been implementing on all our Intune onboardings with our customers and our professional service engagements. Is Laps. We like to use Laps here. Laps is local admin password policy, password solution, and we can actually leverage Intune and Azure AD to have Intune manage the local admin password, sync that password, rotate that password every X amount of days. I believe we can determine that value within the policy itself. We can also leverage what to do after that, say that session. Say we have a user using, we give them the admin creds and they need to install an app on them by themselves, or they need to change a firewall rule within their device. We can actually hand them over the password, rotate the password at will, or after a 24-hour grace period, we can reset that, have it auto reset that password, terminate any local session or sessions that may be active with that local administrator account, and then proceed to still have our devices secure, not giving those end users full, keys to the kingdom, as you so speak to that device.
Right, right. And with that, with the Lapse solution, you're really empowering your users. And I know when I say empowering users, usually the response that Nick and I would get from all of our clients is like, oh, we don't want to. But then the thing with modern work, right, that's kind of what it does, right? I can freely give this password to one of my users in the organization, knowing, right, if I'm the IT administrator, knowing that it's going to be changing dynamically, right, depending on how I set it, right? And the functionality of it really is basically like the basic UAC settings for all my IT professionals, you know what I mean? If a user wants to install an application and they're getting that prompt, throw them that Lapse password.
That's pretty cool. Thank you, guys. Next question we have here, if we move to Intune, can we get rid of our on-prem SCCM? Are all the features supported by Intune currently?
I would say yes. I believe Intune does fulfill that need to get rid of SCCM. When we think about SCCM, we think of imaging, an imaging server, having all these different
device
images,
collections.
these different things for our devices and for our users per department. Intune does that extremely well, and I even think it excels better than SCCM in most fashion. We can also talk about, in the same sense, GPOs, even though not handled by SCCM, it's another thing we commonly get compared to when moving to Intune. It's like, how do we do GPOs? Can we input GPOs? Yeah, we do support GPOs. We actually have a little nifty tool in preview that supports ADMX files that Intune will go ahead and scan your ADMX files, look at everything that you have deployed in your environment, and then we'll try to one-for-one recreate those same configuration profiles and policies for your devices.
Wonderful.
Sweet. And the next question we have here, is this session going to be recorded? Yes, it will be. We will be uploading it to our YouTube channel in the next 24 hours. We will also be sending an email if you're subscribed, and you should be getting the recording to your inbox as well. And then let's tackle the next one here. If we have personal cell phones, but employees use them for work, what can we clear when they're not part of the company?
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I think I talked about that briefly. App protection policies, right? If we can tie in app protection policies and conditional access, you shouldn't have to worry about the personal devices and how they interact within your environment. What app protection policies does really is manage the app itself. Obviously, we can't manage the personal device of an employee or a staff member, right? But we can manage their experience and how they use Outlook, Teams, Word, any of those applications. Now, with conditional access policies, right, we can set it where it has to be a user in my organization, right? If it's not a user in your organization, it'll immediately not even like entertain that idea. But if you did have a corporate fleet of devices, within conditional access policies, we can set certain conditions where we could allow certain devices to be accessible to the data. For example, is my device Intune enrolled? Has it been compliant? When was the last day it checked in? Is it a iOS? Let's just say that you are a company that only has iOS devices. Is it an iOS device? For example, if a user with an Android phone is trying to access the data, it'll just immediately give it that.
Yeah. Thank you, Afif. Now the next question we have is, will the asset tag ID integrate with other third-party asset management apps?
From what I've experienced with other third-party, asset tagging applications, I believe most of the time, unless you're manually assigning asset tags, it usually goes based off of the device name. So if you are still using asset tags in a capacity where it's just pulling the device name and tagging that device, it should play nicely with that, because from some other applications, RMM tools that I've seen where we asset tag devices, it will pull an update. If say you update the name on Intune side, it will pull an update and synchronize down to your RMM if you're using that for asset protection.
And is it possible to use endpoint DLP features without using Microsoft Defender? Like, I have some endpoint DLP policies may require Defender antivirus to be installed and running on the endpoint to function correctly.
Yeah, as long as the device is enrolled into Intune, we have full kind of management with endpoint DLP. You don't necessarily need Defender to run endpoint DLP. It will help strengthen your posture going forward to prevent data loss, but we can definitely set up within compliance policies, purview, more DLP rules that allow us to hit our Intune endpoints as well.
And does it allow a zero trust with the option for users to request access to certain items? For example, they want to install Chrome, they click to request install.
Not to that capacity. I understand what he's trying to explain, but as Nick was mentioning through his application portion, company portal, right? Company portal is going to be the way where we could manage the user experience and how they install applications, right? Now, I briefly talked about dynamic grouping. With dynamic grouping in place, your application deployment should be a better experience for your user. Using the company portal is kind of like your company's app store, right? Hey, if you need that new application I know you've been asking for, check the company portal. It'll be right there. Now, how that looks like on a user experience is they'll see by the level of permissions what kind of apps they have access to.
The next one I'm seeing here is about licensing. So what is the difference between Intune Plan 1 and Intune Plan 2? Do E3 and E5 have the same features as these add-ons? If so, which one, Plan 1 or Plan 2?
So there are a bit of differences between Intune Plan 1 and 2. Within the core, the feature sets within Intune, you get, obviously the both within Plan 1 and 2, you will get, the endpoint management, endpoint security, mobile application management, analytics, configuration manager, which is your your typical core features of Intune, but would plan to, you're looking at like Microsoft Tunnel for per app VPN for, like say iOS or Android applications. You're looking at maybe some specialty devices, so less supported, like Windows, like Windows Glass, like HoloGlass, HoloLens, stuff like that, smart screens, reality headsets, these things that aren't typically in the workspace. And I believe those are like the biggest differentiations between 1 and 2.
Right. And I think another key difference that we missed with 1 and 2 is the Defender for Endpoint integration and all the security aspect that kind of ties into the whole ecosystem.
Gotcha. Now, the next one we have is, can you set up an Apple configurator or AMB with a Windows laptop to enroll iOS devices with Intune on Microsoft Admin Intune account? No Apple. We don't do Apple here.
Oh, we do Apple.
Oh, actually, yes, it does.
We do Apple. We're not shy for iOS. We love our Apple companions. We want them to come over and kind of experience Intune, because I know there are a bunch of Apple solutions out there like Jamf and Adigy and
Kanji.
Yeah. But we do play nice with Apple. We can work well with ABM. We can do app deployment through kind of how ABM does it. It is a bit of a configuration, and we have to identify which side we are actually deploying apps on and which side we want to deploy apps on, because ABM does their app deployment through to their iOS devices, and then we can also do app deployment through Intune. So we just have to really sit down and identify which solution we are going to be primarily using, and then which solution is going to sit on the back end and do the back end work.
And we also have another question that's along the same lines. Is Intune able to work with non-Microsoft management software such as Zoho, Manage, Engine, Desktop Central?
If you guys use Zoho on your team, right?
Zoho. That's our help desk ticketing system. Yeah, it could I wouldn't see how you would need your endpoints to be integrated to like a help desk system, but it shouldn't be any problem. I mean, we use our devices and use that Zoho ticketing system, and it works seamlessly.
Yes. Speaking of integrations, I know Intune plays nicely and has a lot of integrations with some RMM tools. Most commonly, one I've worked with is Inc. at INC. They have an actual Intune integration which allows you to connect your 365 tenant into their application and import your devices, your endpoints into your RMM. So there are ease of use deployments, and most high visibility third party RMMs have this in one-way or two-way integrations between Intune and their solution. So definitely it's something we've seen, and it's getting more common. And then I also see another question in the chat there. Will Intune allow for ease of deployment? There are currently a multitude of ways to join a computer within Intune. We have the autopilot method, right, which does a fingerprint, pretty much a hardware fingerprint for the device to your Azure tenant. We have the typical company portal enrollment method, automatic enrollment through cloud joining or cloud domain joining. We have hybrid joining. We can do per group. So if we don't want to scope this out to all of our, all of our users, we can definitely do this. We can definitely have subsets of users. So there's definitely ease of deployment when it comes to Intune. We can get as granular and as complex as you want to make it, and that's why we love this solution so much.
Well, and if someone is asking if we are currently an E3 shop, I understand Intune is included. How would we get the info to get started with Intune? And does our included Intune need any add-ons to be useful?
Hit us up.
Support at trusttechteam.com. We can help you.
There you go.
No, that would be directly correlated to my team. Yeah, as Fif said, hit us up. We are available. You can send us an email. You can get on a call with one of our reps, and they can get you in a quote and a consultation from us. But we can talk about what your Intune deployment looks like. Everyone is different.
100%.
Every company has different complexities, different requirements, compliance requirements, and we want to be here to help you guys out. And make sure that you guys are taken care of. And our Intune deployments are a little bit different from, I would say, our competitors, because we offer you that training, that one-on-one session with me and Afif to walk you through your deployment, build out your solutions, build out your apps, build out your compliance policies, test them with you, and we kind of show you the ropes. Because after the engagement's over, we don't want to leave you feeling that you can't support this or support this tool by yourself. We want to make sure that you guys are self-sufficient, that you trust us. We're building that trusted tech team.
Yeah, we want to empower you and leave the engagement where you are an Intune expert as well. That's the whole goal.
Awesome, thank you guys. The next question has the M word, migration. Can AD group policies be migrated to the Intune cloud policies?
I'll let you.
Say that one more time.
Can Azure Directory group policies be migrated to the Intune cloud policies?
Oh, yes, definitely. I think that we brushed about that a little bit. Well, within Intune now, group policies are going to be referred to now as device configuration profiles or policies. Now, if you're doing a scoping call with us and we're kind of investigating your environment and kind of getting deep in those regards, whatever kind of GPOs that you want to set as a priority, we have the ability to import them as an ADMX file. And once it gets ingested within Intune, there's particular settings that says that, hey, this could be acceptable. It will be rebuilt as a configuration profile. And certain GPOs would not be accessible, not be, transferable. Now, if they aren't transferable, it doesn't mean that it's the end of the road and the end of the world. We could definitely rebuild them as device configuration profiles and policies.
And then we have a question about blocking. So can Intune be used to block specific applications from being installed, i.e. Dropbox, Google Drive, etc.?
Yeah, we can actually go as far as to remove those apps from user devices. So with Intune, when we talked about app deployment, I really would think we only dove in on how we're deploying apps. Like it's very not rare but infrequent that we see people not uninstalling apps or looking at the ways Intune can actually remove applications from devices. Many of the times where you get a brand new device, it's filled with a bunch of bloatware. So we can develop policies, we can identify those AppX packages, and we can put them in Intune as a removal, remove this from all computers. Also, maybe you're transitioning your stack. Maybe you have a piece of software that you're not using anymore, or there is a vulnerability on a piece of software and you're like, oh, I have deployed that in my environment. I definitely want to get rid of that. We can mass uninstall applications from devices with app configurations.
Definitely. And that's where I'm going to piggyback. And I feel like I've mentioned this and emphasized this a lot, where dynamic grouping comes into play, right? When we have that infrastructure and that foundation in place, everything that we talked about is a seamless experience.
Sweet. The next question it has like 3 questions in it, so I'm going to split it. In the Intune portal view, are there any other features that cover what other inventorying products may cover? Does it send automated EULA agreements?
Okay, so with the first question, no. Unfortunately, with Microsoft, it doesn't show you the view in, like, if you have an integration built in with a third-party product, it won't show you the inventory from their side. It's usually a one-way sync or an import that I've seen integrate with most RMMs. So the third-party RMM tool will actually ingest all your endpoints in, but if you are looking from Intune out, you won't be able to see anything. And then we can do automatic approval of ULA agreements and privacy agreements and stuff like that. So that's definitely something we can do within Autopilot and streamline that from the out-of-box experience.
And does
The
it
user
allow us?
experience in those regards should be similar. If you're thinking of like a traditional Active Directory sense, it's just a profile.
And the last part of this question is, does it allow us to add notes for software assigned or additional accessories assigned with the laptop?
Like peripheral management? Is that what he's trying to say?
It's in the Intune portal view, I believe. Does it allow us to add notes for software assigned?
Oh no, unfortunately, like that metadata kind of tagging, like, hey, I've assigned this user this type of monitor or this set of keyboard. Unfortunately, not. It doesn't have that kind of like that asset management. I think Nick, we talked about that a little bit. It doesn't have that in-depth like asset management. Like I've assigned X user this keyboard and mouse and case. Unfortunately, not there yet.
And we may have covered some of this stuff, but how much management control does Intune have with iOS devices?
It's fairly actually, it's very, we have full control of most devices and what that's getting deployed to and the policies that we have. As I was saying, earlier in like Plan 2, we can do per app VPN tunneling into iOS devices. I can set up compliance policies for mobile devices to tell me if the device has been rootkitted, or I can
or jailbroken.
Or jailbroken. So it's grown a lot since its inception. I would say since COVID-19 happened, they have just dumped tons and tons of money to make this solution as granular and flexible as your device needs.
100%, I agree.
And does Intune Remote Support allow to enter an administrator password when installing drivers or software? Like when I use Quick Assist and a password is requested, the screen turns black and only the user receiving assistance can enter the password.
Right, that's a great question. That's where that lapse solution comes into play, right? If your user is kind of running into that situation, you can throw them the lapse password. But I think more importantly, you're kind of talking about like the UAC settings, right, for your users. You could definitely control that. You want them to be the administrator of their device or not. That all depends on, and that all depends within your organization's philosophy, and that it can all be managed via Autopilot and through a configuration profile.
And is there a way to query every Azure AD joined device and export the members of the local administrators group on those devices with Intune?
Yeah, you can definitely PowerShell something like that. We can definitely make a PowerShell script to query, all your Azure AD joined devices, and if they have an associated Intune, an Intune device, enrolled device, well, we can definitely pool that information either through Graph API or most of the stuff, the endpoint, configuration, the data that we can pull is through Graph API.
Yeah, we could you can also export the whole devices as a CSV file too in a traditional sense as well.
Now, the next one I'm looking at is very specific. Let's see if we can tackle it. Is there a way to run scripts on a regular schedule like GPO would run approximately 90 minutes? The scripts section allows us to assign scripts to groups, but it only runs once. We can set a scheduled task through Intune, but when you remove that configuration policy, it doesn't remove the scheduled task.
So there is a way so Intune does support scripts within the admin center of it. There is a whole section allocated to just scripts. I could set scripts to be run at a level of frequency. If you're talking about at a daily basis, in my mind that I think of like map driving, right? If in that sense. There is a way to configure that as well, and that all depends on how granular your dynamic grouping infrastructure is.
Thanks, Afif. The next question we have is, what's in the box, in the window or desk behind all of you? You'll never know. DTT swag or nothing. Or snacks. Now, the next question, does it work on Windows 10, 11 home version? I believe, does Intune work? Yeah.
So when it comes to home devices, right, does it work? Yes, but there's a process to it, right? If I'm going to go to Best Buy and go ahead and buy a computer that I want to have joined and belong to my organization, that process is called device hashing. With device hashing, you're pretty much running a script and getting it associated and familiar with your environment. And once that process is done, your device now belongs to Intune.
Thank you, Afif. Let's see, what do we have here? With dynamic grouping, we can separate each department into a group and then only give them access to the apps they need in the company portal. Is that correct?
That is correct. That's 100% correct.
And is there a way to manually sync iOS and Android devices? I found a PowerShell scripts to request Android, iOS to sync, but only seems to work with iOS. I have been waiting 12 hours plus for some apps to update a sign, just trying to find a manual sync.
There is a manual sync command. That sounds like a support ticket.
Yeah, definitely reach out to us if you're having any issues, and we'll help you out. So all of these are things that you guys offer as a bolt onto our offerings. That's the question. We are an MSP and would need to be able to learn how to deploy these things on our own, but having a team to help would be ideal. If yes, where do we find pricing?
That would be with me.
Hit us up. Yeah.
If you reach our line and get in contact with our reps. If you're an MSP, we have a couple of different offerings for you. Definitely, if you do an engagement with me or Afif, we will leave you with the most amount of knowledge that you need to kind of set this up for your users and your organizations. We can also set up a longer term engagement to where you can rely on us for some consulting and some best practice tips, and we can definitely go down that right path. And I did see a comment I did like in the chat here from Noah Scott. Patience is a virtue with Intune, and I'm going to span that to all the rest of the Microsoft suite and Azure suite. Patience is a virtue. There's things I have done within Intune and other things with Microsoft that usually take up to 24 hours to reflect changes. So whenever you do something within a policy change or an app change, or you're changing any type of configurations, or you just be patient. Wait the day, then check later, and then see if it's still the problem still comes up.
Yeah, definitely, it's a waiting game. I mean, I've been in a situation before where I have like a bunch of test devices and I'm constantly syncing and waiting for it to happen, right? It's kind of like waiting for paint to dry. But definitely with the game of patience, you'll get the results.
All right. Thank you, guys. And thank you, everyone, for sharing your questions. We're approaching the end of this webinar here. So it's time to announce our winner of the $500 Amazon gift card. So virtual drum roll here. And it's going to be Eddie Dudley. Eddie, we'll reach out to you via email. If you don't get our email, please check your spam folder. If you still don't get it, please reach out to us. But you should be getting instructions in the next two to three business days. And thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you, Afif and Nico, for your amazing insights here. If you have any questions, if we didn't if we didn't answer your questions here, definitely reach out to us. And subscribe to our newsletter if you want more content like this. Subscribe to our channel, our social media. We'll always be pumping out content. We'll always be doing webinars. So stay tuned and have a great rest of your day and an amazing weekend.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Happy Friday.
Thank you.
Friday.